There are promises that weigh heavier than the earth itself. Promises whispered in life's final breaths, when love transforms into an eternal commitment that defies even death. This is the story of a man who chose to honor his word when the whole world told him it was impossible. A farmer who planted hope where only desolation remained, who spoke to the wind expecting answers, who walked each dawn toward a dead field believing life could return. Because some loves don't end with the last goodbye. Some promises become purpose, reason to exist, the final act of dignity from a heart that refuses to surrender. Welcome to the story that reminds us why promises matter, why true love transcends any frontier, even the one separating the living from those who have departed. Stay with us until the end and discover how a simple sunflower can change the destiny of an entire town. And if this story stirs something in your heart, leave us your comment. We want to know what promise you carry in your soul. The sun beat down mercilessly on the fields of Hope Valley, a small farming town in the highlands of Montana. Richard Morrison walked slowly across the cracked ground, leaning on a walking stick darkened by time. 78 years of life weighed on his shoulders, but his eyes still shone with a determination that defied logic. It had been 4 years since Ellen had passed. 4 years since illness took her on an October afternoon, leaving him alone in the house they'd built with their own hands. But before closing her eyes for the last time, she had taken his hand with what little strength remained. "Richard, promise me something," she had whispered in a weak voice. "Anything, my love. Anything. This field was our world. Here we laughed, cried, built everything. Don't let it die. Make it bloom once more. Promise me." And he had promised. With tears streaming down his weathered face, he had given his word. A word that now kept him getting up each morning when his body begged him to surrender. The drought had arrived 2 years before Ellen's death. First slowly, then devastatingly. The nearby creek turned to a thread of mud. The wells dried up one after another. Crops died. Families began abandoning the town, seeking fortune in the cities or crossing state lines. Hope Valley was becoming a ghost town. Of the 50 families that once lived there, barely 12 remained. And most were elderly folks like Richard, too stubborn or too tired to start over somewhere else. Richard stopped in the center of the field. There, years ago, stood a leafy tree that provided generous shade. The drought had taken it too. Only the dry trunk remained, like an accusing finger pointing at a sky that had forgotten how to cry. From his shirt pocket he pulled out a small worn cloth sack. Inside were sunflower seeds, the last from a packet Ellen had saved 5 years earlier. She adored sunflowers. She said they were like little suns that brightened the earth even on the grayest days. With fingers trembling from age and emotion, Richard made a small hole in the hard earth. It was difficult work. The ground was so dry it felt like rock. But finally he succeeded. He deposited 3 seeds with the care of someone placing jewels in a chest. He covered them with soil and pulled a water bottle from his satchel. It was water from his own daily ration, but he didn't care. He poured a bit over the spot where he'd planted. The liquid disappeared in seconds, absorbed by the thirsty earth. "Ellen, my love," he spoke softly, looking at the clear sky, "here I am again. I know you're listening from wherever you are. I promised you I'd make this field bloom, and I won't fail you, even if it costs me my last breath." The wind blew gently, lifting a small cloud of dust. Richard smiled. He always interpreted the wind as her response, like an invisible caress telling him he wasn't alone in this madness. He sat there a long while, watching the spot where he'd just planted. He knew it was absurd to expect something to sprout immediately, but he couldn't help it. Every time he planted something, his heart filled with irrational hope. When he finally stood to return home, the sun was already high in the sky. The heat was suffocating, but Richard barely noticed. His mind was in another time, when that same field was an undulating green sea of crops, when Ellen walked beside him with her straw hat and that laugh that illuminated more than the midday sun. The house was silent when Richard entered. A heavy silence, different from what he'd known when Ellen lived. Before, the silence was comfortable, full of invisible presences and shared glances. Now it was just emptiness. He walked to the kitchen and prepared coffee in the old aluminum pot Ellen had used for 30 years. The aroma transported him to thousands of mornings together. He closed his eyes and could almost see her there, moving among the furniture with that natural grace she never lost. "Good morning, my queen," he whispered to the empty air, as he did each morning for the past 4 years. He took his coffee black and bitter. He never liked it sweet. He sat by the window where he could see the entire field. His gaze sought the place where he'd just planted the seeds, as if he could watch over them from a distance. He remembered the day they bought that land. They were young, barely 23, newly married and full of impossible dreams. The previous owner had warned them the land was noble but demanding. For almost 40 years they fulfilled their part. Each seed planted was an act of faith. Each harvest, a celebration. The field gave them sustenance, but more than that, it gave them purpose and dignity. Ellen said the plants grew better because they listened to their conversations while working. Richard would laugh, but deep down he knew she was right. That field was impregnated with them, with their laughter, their arguments, their reconciliations under the sunset. A knock at the door pulled him from his memories. It was Arthur, his closest neighbor. A 60-year-old man, still strong, who had decided to rent his land to a solar panel company. "Richard, how are you, old friend?" asked Arthur, entering without waiting for an invitation as lifelong friends did. "Getting by, Arthur. Day by day." Arthur sat without ceremony. "I saw you this morning in the field. Did you plant something?" "Sunflowers." Arthur sighed deeply. "Richard, with all respect, you know they won't grow. There isn't enough water. You've been trying for years and nothing's come up." "I know. Then why do you keep going?" Richard looked at his friend with tired but firm eyes. "Because I promised Ellen. And promises to those we love don't break, not even when they seem impossible." Arthur shook his head. "You're stubborn as a mule, always have been. But listen, the solar panel company is still looking for land. They'd pay you well. You could go with Thomas to the city, live comfortably. This is my home, Arthur. This is my place. Your place is wherever you're alive and well, old man. What if you get sick here alone? If you fall and nobody finds you? Think about it." Arthur stood to leave. "All right. Just take care of yourself, okay? And if you need anything, you know where to find me." When his friend left, Richard sat thinking. Was it stubbornness or love that kept him there? Perhaps there was no difference. That night, Richard had difficulty sleeping. He got up and went to the porch. The night sky was spectacular, millions of stars shining in the absolute darkness. Ellen and he used to sit here identifying constellations, inventing stories about the stars. "Can you see me from up there, my love?" he whispered to the sky. "Do you think I'm crazy?" Arthur thinks so. Maybe he's right. But I can't stop, Ellen. I can't break my promise to you. The night wind blew softly. Richard took it as an answer. The following days were the same. Richard walked each morning to the field, watered the seeds carefully, spoke to them as Ellen used to do. "Good morning, little ones. Today is a new day. You have to be strong." The first week passed without signs of life. The second showed no changes either. By the third week, Richard began to doubt. Maybe the seeds were too old. Maybe the earth was too dead. But he kept going. Because a promise was a promise. The fourth week brought something unexpected. Not the sprout he hoped for, but a visit. A car raised dust on the dirt road. Richard recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Thomas, his son. Thomas got out of the car dressed in city clothes. Behind him came Lucia, his wife, and 2 children Richard barely knew. His grandchildren Danielle and Andrew. "Dad," Thomas embraced him. Richard noticed his son held back tears seeing how thin he'd become. "You look different." "Old, I know. It happens when you reach my age." Richard smiled and looked at his grandchildren. "But look who's here. You've grown so much." The children approached shyly. Danielle was 9 years old, Andrew 7. The visits had been so spaced out they were almost strangers. "Hello, Grandpa," they said with politeness but distance. They entered the house. Lucia looked around with concern. Everything was clean but old. The furniture, the curtains, even the air seemed ancient. "Dad, have you been eating well?" asked Thomas, noticing the scarcity in the kitchen. "I eat what I need." The children explored the house with curiosity. Andrew found a box of photographs and began looking through them. "Dad, is this Grandma?" He showed a photo of young Ellen in the field, her hands full of dirt and an enormous smile. Thomas took the photo and stared at it a long while. "Yes, champ. That was your grandmother. The strongest woman I ever knew." Richard approached. She was beautiful. And not just on the outside. She had a heart that wouldn't fit in her chest. "I miss her, Dad. Every day." "Me too, son. Me too." After eating something Lucia prepared, Thomas finally brought up the topic that had brought them there. "Dad, we need to talk about your situation. You can't keep living here alone. It's not safe anymore." "I'm fine, Thomas." "Dad, you're not fine. Arthur called me. He said he finds you weak, that you've fallen a couple times." Richard shot an annoyed look toward where he knew Arthur's house was. Meddling busybody with good intentions. "It was only a couple times. This house needs repairs. The field is dead. There's no future here, Dad." "There is a future. I planted sunflowers 4 weeks ago." Thomas sighed. "Dad, a sunflower doesn't change the fact that this land no longer works for farming." Richard felt anger growing in his chest. "Doesn't work? This land fed us for almost 40 years. This land gave us life. It gave you to me." "I know, Dad. And I'm grateful. But things changed. Your mother knew the drought would pass. It always passes. Mom died 4 years ago, Dad. And the drought is still here." The silence that followed was heavy. The children stopped exploring, sensing the tension. Richard stood up. "Come with me. I want to show you something." They walked toward the field. Richard went slowly but with determination. They reached the place where he'd planted the seeds. And then they saw it. A small green sprout had emerged from the earth. Tiny, fragile, but undeniably alive. "My God," Thomas whispered. Richard knelt with difficulty. His hands trembled as he gently touched the sprout. "See, I promised your mother I'd make this field bloom. And I'm going to keep that promise." Andrew approached with amazement. "Grandpa, how did you make it grow? At school they said it doesn't rain here." Richard knelt beside his grandson. "With love, Andrew. And with patience. Your grandmother taught me that some things are stronger than drought." Danielle also approached, gently touching one of the sprout's leaves. "It's pretty, Grandpa. It seems magical." "It is, sweetheart. It is." Thomas was in shock. He had come prepared to convince his father to sell to leave. But there was the proof that his father had achieved something impossible. "Dad, I didn't know it had grown. You didn't ask. You assumed I'd failed. I'm sorry, Dad." "You're right." That night, the family ate together. Thomas had gone to town to buy provisions. For the first time in years, the house felt full of life. After the children fell asleep, the adults stayed on the porch watching the stars. "How much time do you have left, Dad?" Thomas asked in a low voice. Richard didn't pretend not to understand. "Not much. I feel it here." He touched his chest. "The heart is tired. It's worked 78 years. It deserves to rest." "Don't say that. It's the truth, son. And it's okay. I've lived a good life. I loved an extraordinary woman. I had you. I met my grandchildren. And your promise?" Richard smiled in the darkness. "That sunflower is going to bloom soon. I can feel it. And when it does, I'll have kept my word. Dad, to me it's just a piece of land. But now I understand. For you and Mom it was the entire world. It was proof that 2 ordinary people could build something beautiful. And when she died, when the drought killed the land, I felt like our entire life had been erased. But that sunflower is the earth's memory. It's proof that Ellen and I were here, that we loved, that we mattered." Thomas embraced his father. "You mattered, Dad. You'll always matter." The family stayed 3 days. During that time, Richard enjoyed the company like he hadn't in years. The children lost their shyness and spent hours listening to stories about their grandmother. When Thomas had to return to the city, he had one last conversation with his father. "Dad, when the sunflower blooms, what will you do after? After I can rest in peace." "Don't talk like that. It's not sadness, son. It's acceptance. I want to be where I was happy, where Ellen and I built our life. They embraced for a long time. Call me when it blooms, Dad. Promise me." "I promise you." 2 days after Thomas left, Richard received a visit from Father Michael, the town priest. A 50-year-old man with a kind smile. "Mr. Morrison, how are you?" "Father, what a surprise. Come in, come in. I've been told you're planting in dead earth. Some say you're losing your mind." "And what do you think, Father?" The priest smiled. "I think faith and madness sometimes look very much alike. Why do you do it?" Richard looked toward where his sunflower was growing. "Because I promised Ellen. In her final days, she asked me to make this field bloom again. Mr. Morrison, Ellen is with God. She's not judging you. But I am, Father. For almost 40 years that woman gave me everything. The least I can do is honor her last wish." Father Michael nodded. "I understand. But tell me, what if you don't succeed?" Richard was silent for a long while. "I have to try until my last breath. Because if I give up, it'll be like everything Ellen and I built meant nothing. It meant a lot, Mr. Morrison. Nobody can take that from you." "I know, Father. But I need more than memories. I need the earth itself to remember. That sunflower is our footprint. It's proof that Ellen and I existed, that we loved." The priest stood and placed his hand on Richard's shoulder. "You are a man of faith, Mr. Morrison. May God bless you on your journey." The weeks passed and the small sprout continued growing, defying all probabilities. Richard watched over it like a first-time father. Each morning he walked to the field, regardless of the pain in his knees, regardless of the fatigue accumulating in his bones. He adjusted the amount of water with millimeter precision. He protected the plant from the most intense sun with an old tarp held up by sticks. He spoke to it as Ellen used to do with all her plants. "Good morning, my treasure. Today you're going to grow a little more, right? Your grandmother would be so proud of you." Arthur visited often, surprised by the plant's progress. "It's incredible, Richard. It's really growing. How do you do it?" "It's not me, Arthur. It's Ellen. She's caring for this plant from wherever she is." But while the plant grew, Richard weakened. The chest pains were more frequent. Some days he had to stop 3 or 4 times on the way to the field to catch his breath. His legs barely supported him. One morning, Arthur found him sitting on the ground, halfway there trying to breathe. "Richard, are you okay? I just need to rest a moment." "You need to go to the doctor, stubborn old man." "I'm old, Arthur. What did you expect?" "I expected you to have common sense." Arthur helped him up. "I'm going to take you to the field." When they arrived, the sunflower was already almost a meter tall. The stem was strong and green, with wide leaves that shone under the sun. "It's beautiful," Arthur whispered with genuine admiration. "It is. And soon it's going to bloom. I can feel it." That night, Richard had a dream. Ellen was in the field, but the field was green and full of flowers. Thousands of sunflowers stretching to the horizon. She walked among them, young and radiant, in her favorite white dress. "Richard," she called, her voice clear as bells. "Come with me." He tried to walk toward her, but his legs wouldn't respond. "I can't, my love." "Not yet." She smiled with that infinite tenderness. "You're doing well, my old man. I'm proud of you. Am I going to make it, Ellen? Am I going to keep my promise?" "You're already keeping it, Richard. Each day you get up, each step toward the field, each drop of water you give that plant. The result isn't what matters. It's the love with which you do it. But I need to see it bloom." "You will, my love. I promise you." He woke with tears in his eyes and a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't pain. It was peace. Days turned into weeks. The sunflower grew with astonishing determination. It was already over 1.5 meters tall, with a stem as thick as a man's arm. And then Richard saw it. A bud was beginning to form at the top. "It's going to bloom," he shouted to Arthur when he passed by to visit. "Look, the bud is growing." Arthur examined the plant with amazement. "You're right. In a few days it's going to open." Richard felt his heart race. After so much effort, so much pain, so much blind faith, he was about to keep his promise. But that same afternoon, the chest pain returned with brutal force. Richard dropped into his chair, struggling to breathe. It was different this time. Deeper. More final. Just a little more, he begged his body. "Just until it blooms. Please." He called Thomas. His son answered on the second ring. "Dad, are you okay? Your voice sounds strange." "I'm fine, son. I just wanted to tell you the sunflower is going to bloom soon. The bud is forming." "Really? Dad, that's wonderful." "Yes. Your mother would be happy." "Dad, are you sure you're okay?" "I'm tired, Thomas. Very tired. But happy. I'm going to keep my promise. I'm coming tomorrow. I want to see the sunflower with you." "I'd like that, son." That night was the longest of Richard's life. The pain came and went like waves. But each time he closed his eyes, he saw the sunflower bud. He just had to hold on a little longer. And now, before we continue, I want to ask you something. If this story is touching your heart, if it's reminding you of your own promises, your own loves, leave us a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this. And in the comments, share with us. What promise do you hold in your heart? Your story can inspire others. Let's stay together until the end of this story. Morning came with difficulty for Richard. It was hard to get out of bed. Every movement was agony. But he forced himself to stand, to dress, to take his walking stick. He had to reach the field. He had to see his sunflower. The path that normally took 15 minutes took him over an hour. He had to stop constantly, fighting against the pain, against exhaustion, against the weight of age. But he kept going, step by step, breath by breath. And when he finally arrived, what he saw stole the little breath he had left. The sunflower had bloomed. It was magnificent, enormous, golden, perfect. The petals extended toward the sun like arms opened in celebration. The dark center looked like an eye staring directly at the sky. It was the most beautiful thing Richard had seen since the last time he saw Ellen smile. He fell to his knees before the flower, crying without control. "I did it, Ellen. I did it, my love. I kept my promise." The wind blew gently, swaying the golden petals. Richard could feel Ellen's presence there. He could feel her pride, her love, her gratitude. He stayed there a long while, simply watching the flower, absorbing it, etching it into his memory for eternity. It wasn't just a flower. It was the culmination of a life of love. It was proof that promises matter. It was hope made real. With trembling hands, he pulled out his old phone. He took a photograph of the flower. It was blurry, but captured the essence. A golden sunflower shining in the middle of the desert. He called Thomas. "It bloomed, son." The sunflower bloomed. There was silence. Then Thomas spoke with a broken voice. "Really? Really? It's perfect, Thomas. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Dad, I'm leaving right now. Wait for me. Please." "All right, son. I'll wait for you." He sat with his back against the dry trunk of the old tree. From there he could see the sunflower perfectly. The sun illuminated it with an almost celestial light. "How beautiful our flower is, right, Ellen?" He spoke to the air. It was worth every drop of water, every painful step, every moment of doubt. The wind responded, soft and warm, like a caress on his cheek. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, just to rest. He was so tired. But it was a satisfied tiredness, the tiredness of one who has completed his work. He thought about his whole life, about the boy he was, the young man who fell in love with Ellen, the man who worked the land from dawn to dusk, about the widower who refused to let the last promise die. It had been a good life. A life with purpose. A life with love. He opened his eyes and looked at the sunflower once more. The sun made it shine as if it were made of pure gold. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." The chest pain returned, stronger than ever. This time, Richard didn't fight against it. He received it like an old friend who was finally coming to take him home. "I'm coming, Ellen," he whispered. "I'm coming, my love." The world began to blur. The colors became brighter. The sunflower's gold was blinding now. Beautiful, perfect. And then he saw her. Ellen was standing next to the sunflower, young and radiant, in that white dress. Her smile was the sun itself. She extended her hand toward him. "Richard," her voice said. "You did it, my love. I'm so proud of you." "Ellen." Richard tried to stand, but his body no longer responded. "Easy now," she approached and knelt beside him. She placed her hand on his cheek, and Richard could feel it, warm and real. "Rest now. You can rest now. Did I keep my promise? You kept it and more. You didn't just make the field bloom. You made hope bloom. You showed everyone that love is stronger than death." Richard smiled. Tears ran down his face. "I missed you so much. And I you. But now we don't have to miss each other anymore. It's time to go home. Home. Yes, my old man. To our true home. Where there are no droughts, no pain, no goodbyes." Richard looked at the sunflower one last time. It seemed to shine with its own light. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "It is. Like everything we built together." He took Ellen's hand. It was warm, real, perfect. The pain disappeared. The tiredness evaporated. "Ready?" Ellen asked. "Ready." They stood together, hand in hand, and began to walk toward the light. Arthur arrived first. He had seen Richard walk toward the field that morning, and something in his instinct told him to go look for him. He found him just as he'd gone, sitting against the tree with a smile on his lips, looking at the sunflower. He knew, even before approaching, that his friend had departed. There was something in the stillness, in the peace of the scene, that needed no confirmation. He knelt beside his old friend and gently closed his eyes. "Rest. Richard. You did it. You kept your promise." When Thomas arrived 2 hours later, driving desperately from the city, he collapsed. He threw himself beside his father, embracing the body that no longer had life, crying all the tears saved for years. Finally he looked up and saw the sunflower. And he understood. His father hadn't died in defeat. He had died in victory, after keeping the most important promise of his life. "He did it," Thomas whispered, looking at the golden flower. "The stubborn old man did it." The funeral was 3 days later. People came from all over town and from neighboring towns. Richard's story had spread. The old farmer who made a sunflower bloom in the middle of the drought. The man who kept his promise to the end. They buried him next to Ellen in the town's small cemetery. Thomas planted sunflower seeds on both graves. After the burial, Thomas returned to the field with his family. They stood watching the sunflower, which remained firm and beautiful. "What are you going to do with the land, Dad?" asked Andrew. Thomas had thought a lot about that. The solar panel offer was still on the table. He could sell and close that chapter. But then he looked at his children, saw how they looked at the sunflower with reverence, and knew the answer. "I'm not going to sell it. This land is your grandparents' legacy. It's where they loved, worked, lived. We're going to care for it. And when the drought passes, we'll plant again." Danielle approached the sunflower. "Grandpa did something impossible, didn't he?" Thomas smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. He did something impossible. Because love makes the impossible possible." 2 months after Richard's death, it began to rain. It wasn't just any rain. It was a massive storm that lasted 3 days. The sky that had been clear for years filled with dark clouds. The dry streams filled up. The wells refilled. The thirsty earth drank and drank. When the rain stopped, Something miraculous had occurred. Around Richard's sunflower, in a perfect circle, hundreds of small sunflowers had sprouted. The seeds the original flower had produced all germinated at the same time. Thomas received the call from Arthur at 6 in the morning. "Thomas, you need to come. You won't believe what happened." When he arrived at the field, Thomas was left speechless. Where before there had been only one solitary sunflower, now there was a sea of green sprouts. And in the center, taller and brighter than ever, the original sunflower remained like a golden guardian. "It's as if Mr. Morrison planned it all," said Arthur with tears. "As if he knew the rain would come after keeping his promise." Thomas knelt in the damp earth, touching the sprouts with reverence. He didn't plan it. He simply trusted. He had faith when no one else did. The following weeks were transformative. The sunflowers grew rapidly, not just in Richard's field, but throughout Hope Valley. The drought after 5 long years had ended. Families that had left began to return. Dead fields started to revive. The town that was dying found new life. It was his love, the grandmothers in the square said. His love for Ellen was so strong it broke the drought's curse. It was his faith, the young people said. He taught us we should never give up. It was his promise, the farmers said. He reminded us that promises are sacred. Thomas began visiting the field every weekend with his family. Andrew and Danielle helped care for the sunflowers, learning the lessons their grandfather had tried to teach. 1 year later, the entire field was covered with sunflowers. Thousands of them, all descendants of that first impossible flower. It became an attraction. People came from all over the region to see Mr. Morrison's field. Thomas decided to convert the house into a small museum. He preserved everything as his father had left it. The photographs, the furniture, the old coffee pot. But he added panels telling the story of Richard and Ellen. At the entrance he placed a plaque, in memory of Richard Morrison and Ellen Morrison, who taught us that true love never dies, that promises are sacred, and that even in the most arid desert, faith can make miracles bloom. Father Michael blessed the museum at its inauguration. Mr. Morrison taught us the true meaning of faith. Not passive faith, but active faith that goes out each day and trusts. This field of sunflowers is his final sermon. The farmers began a new tradition. Each year, on the anniversary of Richard's death, they planted sunflowers in their fields. Not for economic benefit, but as a reminder that love and perseverance overcome any adversity. Andrew, who developed a deep love for farming, would say, "I want to be like Grandpa Richard. I want to honor the land and promises." 10 years later, the field continued blooming. The sunflowers had spread beyond the original boundaries. They seemed to have a life of their own, propagating naturally, reclaiming land that had been considered dead. One spring afternoon, Thomas was in the field with his entire family. They sat among the sunflowers, sharing stories. The wind blew gently, swaying the golden flowers. "Do you know what day it is today?" asked Thomas. "Today, 45 years ago, my parents bought this land. They were full of dreams, and they began to build what we now enjoy." He raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to Richard Morrison and Ellen Morrison, for their love, their work, their faith, for teaching us that promises are sacred, that love transcends death, and that there's always a seed of hope. To them." To them, everyone repeated. The sun began to set, painting the sky with impossible colors. The sunflowers shone with golden light, like thousands of little suns. It was a perfect moment. Andrew looked around. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Thomas nodded with tears. "It is. And it exists because 2 people decided to love each other and never give up. Like the love we all deserve to have," added Danielle. The wind blew stronger, making the sunflowers all lean in the same direction. Thomas smiled. He would always believe it was Richard and Ellen communicating, telling them they were there, that they saw them, that they were proud. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered to the wind. "Thank you for teaching us what really matters." Night fell over the sunflower field. The family continued gathered, telling stories, laughing, creating new memories in the place where so many others had been created. And the sunflowers, those descendants of the original miracle, kept swaying with the wind, golden guardians of a promise kept, silent witnesses of an eternal love. The story of Richard and Ellen teaches us that promises made with love are sacred. Love doesn't end with death, it transforms and remains in every action we take to honor those we love. Life presents us with droughts in many forms, but there's always a seed of hope waiting to be planted. We're never alone, those we love walk with us in invisible but powerful ways. We all have promises to keep and the capacity to create our own miracle if we have faith and perseverance.